Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of stories, as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 600 likes on this one. I think if everyone took a quick second, we could do it. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. Sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I don't know if there is like a specific format to make these posts or something, but I'm just going to get straight to it. I'm posting this because, I don't know, maybe someone knows more about this. Maybe someone can help me figure out what happened to me and my best friend in the Holly Hills Mall parking garage. My name is Ethan, and my friend Aaron and I have a bit of a niche hobby. We're urban explorers. Basically, for the uninitiated, that just means we like to explore abandoned man-made structures. My favorites have always been places like water parks and theme parks. Aaron is more into the spooky stuff like hospitals and such. We can freak ourselves out at times, but for the most part, we never believed in anything other than the corporeal. We've been doing this in our free time for around 10 years now, so we are pretty experienced. We know what to bring, how to avoid getting caught by the police or security, and when to get out of a place. Recently we went to go visit my brother for a few days in Virginia. He just had a new baby, and I wasn't able to make it down for the birth, so I was making up for it a few months later. He lived in a small town called Holly Hills, about 30 minutes out from Richmond. It's a pretty boring place, but my brother tipped us onto a cool spot to check out near town, an old abandoned mall simply named the Holly Hills Mall. It was built in the early 80s by some wealthy lumber family that wanted to bring more people to the town. Houses need lumber, and that means more money for them. As you can guess, it didn't really work out. The mall was operational for about 7 years before it shut down in 1987. I know none of this is really important, but this helps me get my thoughts in order, and honestly, the history of these structures is part of the allure for me. Anyway, we decided it would be fun, and planned a trip on the last day in town, on the way to the airport for a late flight. We woke up bright and early, packed our bags and supplies into the rental car, and said our goodbyes to my brother, his wife, and their kids. The mall sat right on the edge of town. I thought this was odd, seeing as how they usually build that kind of thing central to town for ease of access, but I didn't think much of it. The mall was surrounded by pretty heavy brush and trees, as well as a tall chain-link fence. The entrance was blocked off by a typical dilapidated gate, held closed by a simple chain and padlock. Aaron pulled up to the gate, and I hopped out to apprise the situation. Oddly, the padlock wasn't even locked. Unusual, but not on scene. Sometimes people just stop giving a crap about these old places and don't even check on them anymore. Honestly, it makes us a bit more relaxed in these situations because it usually means no security. I opened the gate, and Aaron pulled the car through. The building wasn't the biggest mall we've seen, but it was bigger than we expected. We drove through the deserted parking lot and pulled the car up to the first entrance we saw. We grabbed our supplies and entered the building. The mall exploration itself was pretty uneventful. It was cool to see all of the ads and architecture that seemed frozen in time, like we stepped back into a stale, post-apocalyptic version of the 80s. There was a pretty massive hole in the ceiling where the skylight had given way to snow, or the elements or something. The tree that sat in the center of the courtyard had grown massive, and was protruding out of the hole in the ceiling. Aaron does these explorations for the fun of it, but I am a bit of an amateur photographer, so I do it for the photos mostly. I snapped a bunch of what I think would have been amazing photos, but Unfortunately, I lost the camera. Well, I didn't lose it per se. I know exactly where it is, but we'll get to that. During the mall exploration, I did have a feeling that we were being watched. Distant sounds of glass crunching underfoot, or a figure just out of the corner of my eye that disappears right when you look in its direction. But I knew this was just my mind playing tricks on me. There were no signs of security, and no real reason that, even if the cops knew someone was in the building, they would even care to come check. At least that was my thoughts on it, so I ignored it. We hung out in the food court for a bit, ate some sandwiches we had packed for lunch, and then decided to make our way to the car. We got to the car, loaded up, and headed out. But on our way to the exit, we noticed a parking garage. It was a 5-story garage from the looks of it, and though usually uninteresting, for some reason Aaron wanted to check it out. We spent less time in the mall than we thought we would, so I figured, what the heck, we had the time. We entered the garage on the first floor, marked as floor 0. We drove up to floor 4, did some donuts, and Aaron tried his best to reenact Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift on the way down. I was clenching the entire time, of course, because I didn't want to die, but also, it was a rental car. We didn't have the money to pay for damage done by joyriding in an abandoned mall parking garage. We got back down to floor 0, had a laugh, and started toward the exit, until we noticed the ramp heading down to a lower floor. Aaron pointed out how odd it was that there was a huge parking lot, plus a parking garage with 5 floors above ground, and seemingly sub-floors below ground, for a fairly small mall in a small town. So we thought we'd make our own detour to see what was down there. Obviously, we were expecting either darkness or water, and we found the first option. Darkness. Aaron turned on the brights and we drove around and found nothing, as expected. What we didn't expect was to see another ramp down to another subfloor, so of course we decided to make a game of it. We both guessed how many subfloors this garage had, and Aaron headed down the ramp. I had guessed, too, that this next floor was gonna be the bottom. He said 5. He was being stupid, but imagine our surprise when there was yet another subfloor. We both laughed in disbelief when we came around the corner on the 4th subfloor to see a ramp down to the 5th. This is a 10-floor parking garage, including floor 0, for this mid-sized mall in this tiny town. What were they thinking? They really overestimated the draw that this place was gonna have. Curiously, we headed down to subfloor 5. At this point it was dark. Like, super dark. There was no other light from anywhere other than our headlights. We rounded the corner and were in silent awe to see yet another ramp down. We both looked at each other, and I think one or both of us said, "What?" Without further discussion, Aaron steered the car down the ramp to the next floor. For the next 6 floors we drove on in awe and confusion. We were now 11 floors underground. It didn't make sense. Aaron started coming up with theories, getting excited that maybe we'd found the entrance to a secret government base or a sprawling underground doomsday bunker. But he stopped mid-sentence when we both saw something we weren't expecting. A car. It was parked in a spot with its headlights on. As we pulled closer, I decided to roll down the window to see if I could hear anything. Immediately, the unexpected cold from the parking garage filled the car. It was mid-May at the time and was a fairly warm day, so the cold felt out of place. But we were underground, so I chalked it up to that. I could hear the sound of our tires against the pavement and the hum of our car's engine. As we pulled up next to the parked car, I could hear that it, too, was running. The car itself looked like it was an older make, something from the 70s or 80s. Inside it was seemingly empty. I suggested aloud that perhaps the car belonged to the owner of the property, or a security guard who was doing his rounds, that he might be back any minute. But Aaron pointed out, the car was covered in a thick coat of dust, like it had been there for a very long time, but it was running. I figured it just needed a wash. Aaron did what he does best, and convinced me to get out of the car and investigate further. Only after a bunch of protests and suggestions that we just head out, but he persisted. I exited and carefully made my way around the car, looking inside for any sign of life, but inside there was nothing but leather car interior, except for the passenger seat where a satchel sat, with a thermos resting on top. The keys were in the car, and the radio hummed softly with static. Oddly, everything inside the car also seemed to be covered in dust. Aaron urged me to open the door, and I decided to give it a try, but of course it was locked. I looked around a lot, only being able to see the door to the stairs and the elevators next to it, illuminated by the headlights of the two cars. I hurried back to our car, closed the door, and rolled up the windows. I urged once again for us to make our leave. If there was a security guard lurking around, I didn't want to have to deal with that, especially before our flight in a few hours. Again, Aaron protested. He had to know how many floors this thing had. I can't say I wasn't curious as well. So we left subfloor 11 and headed further down into the depths of the structure. We continued on in silence for 12 more floors before I spoke up. This was messed up. It didn't make any sense, and at this point, it just felt wrong. Dangerous. I was in the middle of expressing this to Aaron when I noticed he had stopped the car and was staring silently ahead. I looked and was astonished to see a horse just standing there. It had the thing around its nose, the reins or whatever, and it was just standing there. After a moment of staring and confusion, Aaron said something like, "Is that a horse?" And I replied with some sort of grunt of confirmation. The horse finally turned in our direction, and I'm pretty sure I screamed when I saw the skin hanging off the side of the horse's face, his skull exposed beneath. It was then I saw the blood on the floor, a large streak going from beneath the horse's hooves off into the darkness. I didn't want to know anymore. I wanted to get out of there, and I told Aaron as much. Aaron, against his and my better judgment, wanted to go on. He wanted to know what this all was, but this time I didn't let up. I was louder and more insistent than I've probably ever been with him, and he could see that, I think, so he agreed and threw the car in reverse. We backed up and started back up toward the ground floor. At this point, I decided to try my phone. I had figured I wouldn't get any signal underground, and I was right, but I tried it anyway. Nothing. Again, we drove in silence for a few hours. Aaron finally broke the silence to apologize, but I stopped him short. The floors were numbered. Ever since we started heading down, they were each numbered B1, B2, B3, etc. We were on B23 when we turned around and headed back up, but the sign I was staring at in the moment said B26, 3 floors lower than we started heading back up. I thought someone was messing with us, but it was all too elaborate of a prank. Still, it was impossible. There was no way we were traveling further down by driving up the ramps. It was physically impossible. But there we were, floor B26. Aaron was just as confused as me, obviously. He got out of the car unannounced and walked over to the sign on the wall. He grabbed it and began to shake it, then stopped and stared, clearly trying to figure it all out. I rolled down my window and called for him to get back in the car. This was followed by another voice repeating my words. Not mine, not Aaron's. He froze in place as the voice whispered loudly from the darkness, "Get back in the car." Aaron did just that. He closed and locked the doors and rolled up the windows. We agreed that we needed to get out of there. This wasn't fun or adventurous anymore, but we didn't know what to do. We thought we were going to get out of there. I remembered that we headed back up on B23, and we decided that we should just keep going up. If the numbers keep rising, we should hit ground level by B46. It didn't make sense, but it was the best we had. We continued driving back up. Aaron was driving a bit quicker than before, and just as we thought, the numbers kept rising, which seemingly meant we were descending, but we held out hope that it was just some weird fluke. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe we didn't see those signs on the way down. We traveled in silence again, all the way to floor B35, but it was an uneasy silence. We were afraid at every turn at what we might see, but there was nothing. Mostly. There were a few floors with things that I did notice, some of them subtle, others glaring. Aaron was focused on driving and didn't seem interested in any of the strangeness we encountered on these floors for the most part. On one floor, I swear I saw a long dining room table with 2 figures sitting at either end, illuminated for only a few seconds by our headlights. Another floor seemingly had a cot in each parking space. They looked to each be occupied by a body. Alive or dead? I don't know. One of the strangest, that even caused Aaron to stop the car for a moment, was a floor that didn't seem like a parking garage floor at all. It looked like we had pulled into a forest clearing. The pillars of the garage, now tree trunks, though the concrete ceiling was still visible above. There were plants, grass, bushes, and a pathway leading to what looked like a small cabin in the distance. The window glowed as if there were someone home, and smoke seemingly billowed out of the chimney. The curiosity overcame my fear and I rolled down the window. The sound of crickets, cicadas, and a cool spring breeze filled the car. Aaron and I looked at each other for a moment before Aaron blurted out, "No, screw that," and continued on up the ramp. Finally, after what seemed like longer than it should have, we reached floor B46. Nothing. I started to cry. It was too much. The realization that we were lost, underground, without any way out was starting to make me feel trapped. We were trapped. It was like I could feel the weight of every floor above us on me all at once. Aaron kept his cool. He tried to console me. He tried to offer explanations. But there was no explanation. We were in a labyrinth of a parking garage. Aaron started driving with purpose. He turned around and started going down again. B47, B48, B49. He stopped the car, turned around again, and started driving back up the ramps. B50, B51, B52. He started to scream. Anger, frustration, confusion, all overflowing into a furious scream. Then in a deafening echo, his scream reverberated around us, outside the car, within the parking garage floor. The windows rattled, the car shook and then shut off. We were now in pitch blackness. The interior of the car was only illuminated by my cell phone, which I had plugged in and had charging. I picked up the phone and turned on the flashlight. Aaron was desperately trying to start the car, but there was nothing. Not even a click. Then he screamed, this time in alarm. In front of us, in the darkness, were 2 large eyes, staring right at us. I have to express that when I say huge, they were massive, each seemingly the size of the wall. They felt almost flat and unnaturally still, but you could feel the consciousness behind them. Something was staring right at us. The whites were snow white and the irises were an icy cold blue. The pupils were dilated and pitch black. And Aaron slammed his fists on the steering wheel over and over. A voice seemingly inside the car whispered again, "Get back in the car." Aaron's percussive maintenance seemed to have worked because the car started back up. without him even turning the key. Whatever was down here seemed to want us to leave, and we wanted to leave too, but we didn't know how. Aaron put the car in reverse and spun it around. I could still see the eyes in the mirror. He sped up the ramp, totally disregarding the numbers. He drove a good 6 or 7 floors before I noticed something standing out in the darkness. Each floor now had a dim light. I was able to calm Aaron down enough for him to listen to me, and I pointed it out. He stopped on the next floor to see the light in the distance. It was a door. The door to the stairs is illuminated by an emergency light above it. It was our only chance. It was our last option. He drove over and parked the car in front of the stairwell door, illuminating it fully with the headlights of the car. We both bolted out of the car. Aaron flung open the door and we started running up the stairs. After the first flight, we saw the number on the stairs, B57. We were ascending. I started to tear up in excitement. We continued on faster than before. For 20 floors, we basically ran. Energized by the fact that the numbers were going down, which meant we were going up. Around B30, we started to slow down pretty significantly. We were still making our way up, but we were tired. It was then that I looked back for the first time. The stairwell above was lit on each floor, but as we made our way up to the next floor, the lights on the previous were turning off. Turning back to head up the stairs, I ran into Aaron, who had stopped in front of me. He was looking up at the top of the next flight of stairs. I looked at what had stopped him. It was a person. A figure huddled in the corner at the top of the stairs. They sat with their head buried into their knees, shaking. Their clothes seemed faded, old, and dusty. Maybe a homeless person who had gotten lost. Maybe the driver of the vehicle. I called out gently to the stranger, something along the lines of, "Hello? Are you okay? Do you need help?" Aaron scoffed. He said we needed help. Screw this guy. He started up the stairs, but when he got near the top, he hugged the rail, facing the figure the entire time. Slowly he rounded the corner and called me forward. The stranger didn't move. They just sat there, shaking, arms wrapped around their legs, face hidden. They were mumbling something, but I couldn't make out what it was. I followed Aaron's lead and carefully passed the person. Same as before, no reaction. We moved on, leaving the figure behind. Aaron led as before, and when I made it to the top of the next flight of stairs, I looked back down, startled to see the gaunt face of a man, his cheeks sunken in, his face pale and old, his eyes a piercing pale blue, staring at me, silent, unnaturally still. I didn't say anything. I slowly walked up and rounded the corner. He stared at me the whole time. Again, I ran into Aaron, who was looking up at the top of the next flight of stairs. It was a figure. It looked like the same stranger. I looked down at him on the previous floor, staring at me, and the next floor, his face buried in his knees. We traded what the heck looks, but Aaron said, "Just ignore it and keep going. We're too close." So we did. Every floor after, he was there, hiding his face as we approached, staring at us as we left. It was unexplainable, but so was everything else so far. We made our way up, finally reaching B1. This time there was no man in the corner. I looked back to the previous top step, and he wasn't there either. I felt like this was a good sign for some reason. We made our way up to floor 0, and we were relieved to see light shining through the cracks of the door. Aaron stopped for only a moment and pushed through the door. He began to laugh. I followed him through, but the cold of the parking garage was back. There before us were the bright headlights of a car. Our car. Where we left it on floor B58. I had no words. Aaron walked back into the stairwell and fell to the floor, distraught and broken. I told him we can just keep going. We could keep going up, but he wouldn't move. He was tired and defeated. His stoic bravery had finally given way to hopelessness and fear. So I decided to go up to the next floor to check it out. I ran up the stairs and I felt a sudden warmth. I could see the light through the cracks of the door, but I knew it was different. I knew it was the sun. I burst through and was blinded by the sudden light of the sun. After the hours and hours in darkness, it took a few moments for my eyes to adjust. We had made it. We were free. We were alive. I ran back down to the previous floor to tell Aaron, but he was gone. I ran out through the door into the garage to check in the car, but he was nowhere to be seen. I called for him, shouted at the top of my lungs. My voice echoed through the parking garage, but nothing. I didn't know what to do. I started down the stairs, but stopped cold. I couldn't go back down. I couldn't get lost down there again. And then I saw, on the top stair of the floor below, the figure was back. It was Aaron, sitting in the corner, his hands wrapped around his knees, staring at me. I called to him. I ran down to him, but when I got to the stair, he was gone. I looked over the railing down at the next flight down, and there he was again, staring. I couldn't go down anymore. I couldn't. I called to him, pleaded with him to come with me, to get it together and get out of there, but he just stared. I promised him I would come back. I cried as I turned around and made my way out of the garage, as I left my best friend behind to save myself, because I was too scared. I ran from the parking garage, across the parking lot, past the gates and to the road. Finally, my phone had a signal and I called the police. They came out and I tried my best to explain what happened. I knew it sounded crazy, but I told them the truth. They went and checked out the parking garage. They searched the entire thing, as well as the mall and surrounding area. Nothing. In fact, they told me there was no subfloors in that garage, like I dreamt it all up. How could that even be? I was tested for alcohol and drugs and fined for trespassing. When my brother arrived to pick me up, I tried my best to explain what happened, but if it couldn't get any weirder, he swore to me he didn't know who Aaron was. They've known each other since they were kids. He's been my best friend for 20 years. But he swore, his wife too, and kids. None of them remembered him. After that, I looked for any evidence of Aaron I could find. All the pictures on my phone were gone. My camera was still in the car, and there was no proof of his existence online. Anywhere. I didn't dream him up. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I don't have any history of mental illness. I didn't make up 20 years of friendship. I've been seeing a therapist and started some meds. It hasn't helped. Nothing has. Something doesn't feel right. This world doesn't feel right. Like I came out of that parking garage into a life I didn't own. I feel like I don't belong here. Every day it becomes more and more clear to me that I have to go back. I don't know what I wanted to get from this post. Maybe to just tell my story, for people to know I existed. Aaron existed. Maybe to find someone who knows what happened to us, who knows something about the Holly Hills Mall, who can make any sense of it. Either way, I have to go back. I have to find Aaron. We have to get back in the car. I have always preferred living alone. No wife, no roommates, and most importantly, no kids. I wanted a cat or dog, but still hadn't gotten over the death of my last one. That all changed one day when I was taking an evening walk and, in a dark alleyway, I saw a crying child. I looked around hoping this wasn't some kind of trap and finally approached her. "Hey there, kiddo, what's the matter?" She stopped crying and looked up at me. I don't know what to do. I don't want to go home where they're all mean to me, but I'm scared and hungry." I offered to take her across the street to the gas station to get a sandwich, to which she stopped crying and silently joined my side, still sobbing and scared. After getting a sandwich that she enthusiastically devoured, I took her to the police station. She said her name was Lilith. She was 10 years old, and upon research the state had no records of her parents or past. They wanted to put her in an orphanage, but she clung to my side. "No, I want to stay with him. He fed me, and he was nice to me." This poor girl acts like she never knew an act of kindness a day in her life. I didn't know how to take care of a child, but something akin to guilt came washing over me. The next day consisted of getting inspected and ultimately being deemed parent certified when they found out I had a good work from home job. Lilith, who I now call Lily, took to the house immediately. She liked looking in the fish tank of my aquarium. She was excited to have her own bedroom and she loved running out in the yard. One thing about her I noticed is that this girl eats like there is no tomorrow. Oddly enough, she wasn't skin and bones when I met her, but she doesn't even have a trace of fat you would expect most kids her age to have. She looked like a mini adult. After eating 3 sandwiches and a bowl of ramen, she went to take a nap. I still haven't totally adjusted to having another living being other than fish and plants in the house. But she brought nice energy, and her always being hungry reminded me to eat something myself. I made a note to do something soon, otherwise she was going to bankrupt my grocery bill. I decided to take her out on a walk around the park area, hoping she would get tired and sleep easy tonight. To this day I regret doing this. On the walking path, a deer walked in front of us. "What is that?" "Have you not seen a deer before?" "Is it edible?" "Yes, actually, though I don't eat them." Lily then walked up, even though I told her it might be dangerous. I then watched in horror as she transformed into something not human. A horizontal line formed on her stomach that opened to a large mouth filled with rows and rows of razor-sharp teeth. Black, corvid-like wings protruded from her back, and a dark circle dripping some kind of black ooze formed over her head. A large tongue like the tentacle of a squid wrapped around the deer and pulled it in. Blood splattered and bone crushed as she chowed on the deer like it was a candy bar. Then, like nothing happened, she turned back into her human form. "That was delicious," I heard her say, having no reaction myself except trying not to faint from the gruesome horror I had witnessed. "We should go home, Dad. You don't look so good." From that point on, I was afraid. Feeding her felt more like I was making an offering to a malevolent deity. And one night I woke up at 3 a.m. to which my blood ran cold when I saw her at the foot of my bed. "Dad, I'm hungry." I got up and made her 2 ham sandwiches. To avoid losing all my food in 3 days and keeping my bill down, I had to resort to more drastic measures. We would go on walks in the woods where we would go deer hunting, and I would let her eat her fill before returning home. On days when we couldn't find deer, I would take her to the rancher when I knew the farmer wasn't home and let her eat a whole cow. With the mess that got left behind, they always ruled up to an animal attack. The thing that got me the most is that when she's not acting like a voracious monster, she was the happiest little girl in the world. She loved having her hair brushed, making daisy chains, and I even bought a Switch so we could play Smash Bros together. I really enjoyed having her around, maybe because I was too lonely before. One evening we went on a walk in town, and we were stopped on the sidewalk. One man was in front of us with a crowbar. Well, well, look at that. He then had an accomplice with a switchblade behind us. Make this easy on yourself, pal, and leave the girl. I was once again afraid not just of the men, but of something happening to Lily. I didn't notice when one of the men walked up to me and whacked at my knee with a crowbar. "Dad!" I heard Lily yell as blood rang through my ears and pain shot through my knee. He grabbed her by the arm, and she transformed. "What the?" I heard the men yell, as she coiled her tongue around his leg and dragged him into her maw like he was livestock. His friend tried to run for it, but she devoured him as well. His screams must have lit up the silent night ambience, but I was in too much pain. My world was spinning. My hearing was muffled and my vision was blurring. Finally, I came out of it long enough to pull the phone out of my pocket and call an ambulance. "Sweetie, if the cops ask you what happened, or anyone asks, I was hit by a speeding car." She nodded, and moments later the ambulance arrived to take me to the hospital. After getting a cast and some crutches, I was allowed to return home. I'm glad my job was work from home, so I don't have to worry about a babysitter, and I was going to homeschool her when the season started. I told her never to transform in front of other people and to never eat another human being again. She agreed to all of it. One night I walked outside and saw her staring at the sky. "Hey, Sweet Pea, what are you looking at?" "What are those lights in the sky?" "Those are stars, sweetie." "They look delicious. I hope one day I can go up there and eat every last star." "I know you will one day, sweetie." I'm still terrified of her. And yeah, I know I live with a monster, but when you love someone, you look past the flaws. She gave me someone to work hard for, and I love her, and she loved me. I think, or at least, I hope. I used to love Disney when I was a little girl. I had every lunchbox, water bottle, backpack, and notebook with Mickey's face on it that I could get my 6-year-old hands on. I would doodle the clubhouse characters during class, and I would ask to go to Disney World every year for my birthday. My family wasn't the wealthiest, so the answer was usually no. My dad would work overtime, and my mom worked 2 jobs. So I would spend a lot of time at home alone. I would sit on the couch and watch reruns of my favorite shows and movies until I passed out, and I would always wake up tucked into my bed. It was to my surprise that after asking to go again for my 7th birthday, they finally said yes. My dad had gotten a big promotion, and they combined the bonus that he received with money that they'd been saving up just for this occasion. My parents have helped me so much in my life, but there aren't many other times that I can remember feeling as much love for them as I did when I opened my birthday card and saw a Disney World brochure. I couldn't wait to go. Unfortunately, I had to wait another 2 weeks for the upcoming long weekend. I couldn't focus in school that entire time. I was too busy thinking about all the rides and characters that I'd get to see. I woke up early Friday morning with enough energy to fly through the ceiling. My parents had been up packing, so the car was already ready by the time I finished my breakfast. We hopped in and set off for Disney. The park was around 4 hours from our house in Tallahassee, so we left early to have time to explore the park for the day. It was around 4 a.m., and the streets were pitch black. The drive was mostly uneventful, and I used my portable CD player to watch old Disney movies that my mom kept lying around. I was halfway through Cinderella when we stopped for gas. The rest stop was pretty dingy. There were some gas pumps for cars and diesel for the trucks, as well as a gift shop for snacks and drinks. The gift shop was quite big, filled with rows of junk food and medicine. I went in with my mom while my dad stayed with the car. While we were shopping, I saw a Mickey-shaped cup and ran to grab it, and when I turned around, my mom was gone. I started to panic. I ran through the aisles, calling for her. After a few frantic turns, I ran into something hard and fell on my back. When I looked up, a large man with a gray beard and rough skin was staring down at me. "Hey there, Missy. You lost?" he asked me. I was frozen in fright at the size of the man. He towered over the aisle, his width taking up the entire space in front of me. He reached his hand out, and I scrambled back down the aisle. I was running now, not daring to look back at the frightening stranger. I turned the corner and ran straight into my mom. I hugged her tight, crying. She stroked my hair and comforted me, but my sense of safety was quickly broken when the man approached us. "Be careful with her, hon. Don't want a kid getting lost around here." My mom muttered a reply that I couldn't hear through my own sobbing. The man eventually left, and my mom carried me back to the car. My dad was worried, but my mom reassured him that it was just a small accident. The next hour was quiet, and I quickly forgot my fear from the gas station when I thought about Disney again. I drifted off with thoughts of cotton candy and Mickey ears. I woke up to a hushed conversation between my parents. They were talking in short, clipped sentences, and their tone made my heart start to race. The inside of the car was filled with harsh light. I looked out the rear window to see a black car driving closely behind us, brights on. My parents were raising their tones now, and I looked past them to see a large trailer in front of our car. The semi-truck had its rear lights on, and it looked like it was slowing down to meet us. We were driving down a 2-lane highway in the middle of a swampy area, and the road dropped into thick mud on both sides. My mom was telling my dad to get over and pass the truck, but another car quickly sped up from behind the back car and pulled up to our left side, blocking us in. The windows were tinted black, and I couldn't get a good look at who was in it. I did see silhouettes, though. The car was full. "Daddy, who are these people?" I asked innocently. My dad turned around to face me, and there was a look of sheer panic on his face. He quickly hushed me and turned back around. In front of us, the trailer doors unlatched. They swung open, revealing a single man standing inside the empty trailer. He was wearing jeans and a worn jacket, and his face was covered in a black balaclava. He quickly rushed to the back of the trailer, then bent over and pushed something along the ground. Something appeared over the edge of the trailer, and after a few moments of pushing, a ramp slammed to the pavement, sending up sparks that made it hard to see in front of us. Something hit hard against the back of our car, and I jolted in my seat. By this point, I was overwhelmed. I started crying, scared for my life. Who were these people? What did they want with us? I turned back to see the black car behind us pushing our car forward. The car to our left turned closer to us, pinning us against the 15-foot drop into the mud below. My dad slammed on the brakes, pushing me forward. The car screeched in defiance of the pushing, but our car was old, and I could feel us moving forward. My mom was crying too, pleading with my dad to turn into the mud. "We'll be stuck, Maggie," he howled. "Nothing to stop them from grabbing us." I could hear the frustration in my dad's voice. He was gritting his teeth, still keeping pressure on the brake. Sunlight was just starting to come out, and I could see to our right that the mud was steadily turning into grass. "Daddy, look," I said, pointing out the window. An exit sign flew past our view. Our front fender scraped against the ramp, wheels not yet making contact. In an instant, a turn-off road opened on our right, and my dad veered off the ramp, barely making the exit. We sped off the highway. The group was still going, and I could see their cars more clearly from farther away. I could see the man in the trailer sticking his head out looking at us. There were gray specks of hair poking through his balaclava. We spent the rest of the day in the hotel, with my parents talking to police about our encounter. I was shaken up by the event, but I was mostly sad to miss Disney for the day. We ended up going the next day though, and I remember that weekend fondly. I'm 16 now, and not many birthdays have topped that one. I don't know who those people were, or what they wanted with us. I'm just getting my driver's license, and despite everything I've learned from driver's ed, there's one thing they didn't teach us. Never drive behind a semi. I had always loved the small, picturesque town of Miller's Crossing, a place where everyone knew each other and crime was practically non-existent. So when I inherited my grandmother's old Victorian house on the edge of town, I was thrilled. My grandma had passed away a few months back, leaving behind a lifetime of memories and a house filled with antique furniture and dusty knickknacks. I decided to move in temporarily to sort through her belongings and maybe get a change of scenery. The first few days were uneventful. I spent most of my time cleaning, organizing, and occasionally chatting with the friendly neighbors who stopped by to offer condolences and share stories about my grandma. It wasn't until the fourth night that things started to get strange. It began with the knocking. I was in bed, just about to drift off to sleep when I heard a soft, rhythmic knocking coming from downstairs. At first, I thought it was just the old house settling, but the knocks were too deliberate, too patterned to be random creaks. I got up, grabbed the flashlight I kept on the nightstand, and cautiously made my way downstairs. The knocking continued, echoing through the empty halls. It seemed to be coming from the basement. I hesitated at the top of the basement stairs, and the flashlight was trembling slightly in my hand. I took a deep breath and descended, one creaky step at a time. When I reached the bottom, the knocking stopped. I swept the flashlight around the basement, illuminating dusty shelves and cobweb-covered furniture, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. I shrugged it off as my imagination playing tricks on me and went back to bed. The next morning, I found something odd. In the kitchen, on the small table where my grandma used to have her breakfast, lay an old, leather-bound journal. I didn't remember seeing it before. Curiosity piqued. I opened it. The journal belonged to my grandmother. It detailed her life in Miller's Crossing, but towards the end, the entries became increasingly erratic and paranoid. She wrote about hearing strange noises at night, about feeling watched, and about something she referred to only as the Watcher. The last entry sent chills down my spine. The Watcher is coming for me. It knocks to warn me, to let me know it's near. I fear my time is running out. That night, the knocking started again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. I followed the sound to the basement once more, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the bottom step, the flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. Panic set in, and I fumbled for my phone to use its light. When I finally managed to turn it on, I saw it. A figure stood in the far corner of the basement, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall and thin, its eyes glowing faintly. The knocking resumed, louder and faster, as the figure began to move towards me. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me. I could still hear the knocking, now accompanied by a low, guttural growl. I didn't sleep at all that night, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. The Watcher is coming for me. The next day I packed up my belongings and left Miller's Crossing, vowing never to return. I don't know what the Watcher was or why it haunted my grandmother, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, somewhere, waiting. To this day, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of knocking, and I wonder if the Watcher has finally found me. After I left Miller's Crossing, I thought I could leave the Watcher behind. I moved back to the city, renting a small apartment and trying to put the past behind me. Life returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could after such an ordeal, but the knocking never truly left me. It would come sporadically, always at night, always when I was alone. Months passed and I started to believe it was all in my head. I even started seeing a therapist who assured me that trauma could manifest in strange ways. I was beginning to feel more at ease, starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I could move on. Then, one evening, I received a package in the mail. There was no return address, just my name written in a neat, old-fashioned script. I hesitated before opening it, a sense of dread creeping over me. Inside the package was an old photograph of my grandmother standing in front of the house in Miller's Crossing, holding a baby. I recognized the baby as myself. Attached to the photo was a note. "You can't escape what's in your blood." I dropped the photo and stepped back, my mind racing. How could someone know about the Watcher? My grandmother never spoke of it to anyone, and I had kept my own experiences to myself. That night, the knocking returned, louder and more persistent than ever. It seemed to come from all around me, echoing through the apartment. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the sound was unmistakable. Then came the growling. I couldn't stay in my apartment. Grabbing only my keys and my phone, I fled, driving aimlessly through the city until I ended up at a 24-hour diner. I sat there, drinking coffee and trying to calm my nerves until the sun came up. Over the next few days, I researched everything I could about the Watcher. I dug through old town records, folklore websites, and anything that might give me a clue. One night, deep in an obscure forum, I found a post from someone in a neighboring town who described a similar entity, a tall, thin figure that knocked and growled, tormenting their family for generations. Desperate, I contacted the poster, a woman named Evelyn. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept in years. She listened as I recounted my experiences, nodding along as if she had heard it all before. "You're not the first," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Watcher is an ancient entity, tied to certain bloodlines. Once it finds you, it never truly leaves." "Is there any way to stop it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "There are ways to keep it at bay," she replied. "Symbols, rituals, protections passed down through the generations. But once it's attached to your bloodline, it will always come back." Evelyn showed me a series of protective symbols and explained a ritual that her family used to keep the Watcher at a distance. I thanked her and left, feeling a mixture of hope and fear. That night, I performed the ritual and placed the symbols around my apartment. The knocking didn't come, and for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. But peace was fleeting. A few weeks later, I found a new note on my kitchen table. "You can't hide forever." I realized then that I couldn't run from the Watcher. It would always find me, no matter where I went or what I did. My only hope was to learn more, to find a way to break the curse that had haunted my family for generations. And so, I returned to Miller's Crossing, to the old Victorian house and the secrets it held. I had to face the Watcher head on, to uncover the truth that my grandmother had hidden so well, because if I didn't, I knew I would never be free. Returning to Miller's Crossing felt like stepping back into a nightmare. The old Victorian house loomed ominously at the end of the street, its windows dark and lifeless. I parked my car and stared at it for a long moment, summoning the courage to go inside. The protective symbols and rituals Evelyn had taught me were my only defense against the Watcher, and I clung to them like a lifeline. The house smelled of dust and decay, as if it had been abandoned for years rather than months. I made my way to the basement, the air growing colder with each step. The door creaked as I opened it, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The basement was just as I had left it, filled with old furniture and boxes of my grandmother's belongings. I set up candles around the room, placing the protective symbols in a circle. I began the ritual, chanting the words Evelyn had taught me. The air grew heavy and I felt a presence watching me from the shadows. The knocking started again, but this time it was different, more insistent, more demanding. As I finished the ritual, the candles flickered and went out. The room plunged into darkness and I heard the growling, closer than ever before. My flashlight flickered to life and I saw it, the Watcher standing at the edge of the circle. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its form seemed to shift and waver. "You cannot banish me," it hissed, its voice echoing in my mind. "I am bound to your blood. I will always find you." Summoning all my courage, I stepped forward, holding out the symbols. "What do you want?" I demanded. The Watcher paused, as if considering my question. "You carry a curse, passed down through your family. Your grandmother tried to hide it, but she failed. The curse is tied to this house, to the land it stands on. To break it, you must understand its origin." With that, the figure vanished, leaving me alone in the dark. I knew what I had to do. I spent the next few days combing through my grandmother's journals and old town records, piecing together the history of the house and my family. I discovered that the land had once belonged to a man named Jonathan Miller, one of the town's founders. He had been accused of witchcraft and executed in the late 1600s, cursing the land and all who lived on it with his dying breath. My ancestors had unknowingly built their home on the cursed ground, and the Watcher was the manifestation of that curse. Armed with this knowledge, I sought out Evelyn once more. Together we devised a plan to lift the curse. It required a powerful ritual, one that would break the bond between the Watcher and my bloodline. It was risky. It was my only hope. We prepared everything in the basement of the house, setting up an intricate array of symbols and candles. As night fell, we began the ritual. The air grew heavy and the temperature dropped. The knocking started again, echoing through the house. The Watcher appeared, its form more solid than ever before. It howled in rage as we chanted the words of the ritual, trying to break through the circle. The candles flickered wildly, and I felt a surge of energy building around us. With a final, desperate chant, the circle of symbols glowed brightly, and a shock wave of energy burst from the center. The Watcher shrieked and dissolved into a cloud of darkness, which was sucked into the earth beneath the house. The air cleared, and the knocking stopped. For the first time, the house felt peaceful. The curse had been lifted. Evelyn and I stood in silence for a moment, taking in what we had accomplished. "It's over," she said, her voice filled with relief. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you," I said, grateful beyond words. As I left Miller's Crossing for the last time, I knew that the Watcher was truly gone. The nightmare was over, and I could finally move on with my life. But I would never forget the terror I had faced, or the strength it took to overcome it. The past would always be a part of me, but now, at least, it wouldn't control my future. Greetings world. So apparently people share their supernatural experiences on here, so I thought I'd share mine. Okay, so before I begin, let me start with some basic information. First of all, I've never been one for the supernatural. I'm not an active believer, but I usually find myself doubting stories of demons or ghosts. However, I would call myself a sensible person. So on the off chance that it is real, I try not to mess with those sort of things. While other children would be saying Bloody Mary or using a Ouija board, you'd find me upstairs eating a snack. The simple truth is, I don't think it's a good idea to mess with the supernatural. If it isn't real, then it's pointless. And on the off chance that it is real, I'd rather not poke it with a stick. I also consider myself very good at spotting turn-around points. For example, when I was 10 I saw something in the lake at a summer camp I was attending. The camp was for kids who were starting to go blind, like me. I was one of the few there with usable sight left, and I swear I saw something in the water of that lake. It was dark, big, and looked dangerous. It could have been a large catfish for all I know, but I felt a shiver up the back of my spine that kept me firmly out of the water for the rest of the camp. I refused to touch the lake, regardless of punishment out of that fear. The part of my brain that says turn around has always been a part I listen to. Now, for a minor additional detail, I have a job at my local gas station. I would mostly be a cashier and janitor for the place. This was fine for me. Even blind, you just have to clean entire sections. And working a cash register is easy with certain accommodations. So I suppose that brings us to the elephant in the room. I'm blind. Being blind means that I have to trust in my other senses. My hearing, my touch. This often means I can mistake things for other things, or get scared of what doesn't exist. Once, for example, I mistook my mother doing some maintenance on our lawnmower as a growling dog. So yeah, I recently acquired a coworker on my shift. His job is to just maintain the shelves, make sure people who need assistance can get gas, and do all the stuff I won't do. It's just the two of us, working that 6-hour shift every day, including weekends. I don't know why he works all week. I do so because I have nothing better to do. His name was Joe, and we worked together. It has been a week since Joe started working with me, but something is off about him. He's incredibly quiet, and doesn't speak unless spoken to. This has become a bit of a problem for me, since I can only detect him when the gas station is quiet, and I hear him moving and breathing. To mention ages, I'm about 20, whereas he, I'm told, is 23. We rarely talk, and even then it's usually nothing but a quick exchange of sentences started by me. I'll yell out Joe, hear him say yeah from somewhere around the store, and ask him either to do something, help me with something, or help a customer. He rarely says more to me than of course and I'll do that for you. His voice is quiet and thin, often as low as a whisper. He really doesn't make it easy on me to find him in the store, but I try. The way I met him was my boss showing up the evening of my shift and saying, "This is Joe. He's going to be working with you, Marcus." I've worked this shift alone for a year now, so I wondered why he was there, and I asked her, "Well, we need someone to cover for those areas where you're weak," was her main reason. I accepted this. I had always had trouble with customer service and stocking the shelves. His first day was fine. I showed him around, my white cane tapping across the linoleum, as I showed him the back room, the shelves, and the bathroom. It was his second when things got weird. I was standing at the cash register when I felt a shiver down my spine. Now I haven't gotten such a feeling in a while, and the place wasn't busy this time. I work late evenings into the night, so I thought on it. I remembered that time at camp when I had felt this feeling and I tried to figure out what was triggering it. That's when I detected it. Behind me, there was the faintest sound of breathing. I turned around quickly and asked, "Joe?" There was a long pause of the same breathing before I got my response. "Yeah?" Joe said quietly from right in front of me. I spun my white cane forward, bumping it into his legs to figure out his distance from me. He was standing about 1.5 to 2 feet away. And before you ask me how I can judge such a distance, you get really good at that stuff when you can't physically see the distance. I then said to Joe, "How long have you been standing there?" 30 minutes, came the quiet reply. That was creepy, right? Look, I don't know about you, but someone standing behind you while you stood at a cash register for 30 minutes is very creepy. I responded somewhat nervously. Don't you have something better to do? His response? No, I finished all my tasks. I really had nothing to say to this, so I just responded with, then head to the back. I'm going to keep working. I didn't hear a response, but I did hear the light tapping of his footsteps. Now most of the time Joe's footsteps sound like a normal person's, the casual clump of rubber or leather or whatever on the bottom of your shoes against linoleum. They did not sound like that this time. It was an odd splat sound. Have you ever walked barefoot in your kitchen? That was the sound it made, rather than the mute of shoes. This was a weirder sound. I didn't think a lot of it at the time, but really, this should have been my first clue that something was up. I was just too weirded out by the idea of him watching me for 30 minutes to think of the sound of his feet. The next shift was really busy, so there wasn't really that much creepiness. I did meet an old woman named Pamela who spoke to me at the register for a solid 30 minutes. That was nice. It was the next shift that something strange happened. I was cleaning around our freezer section with a mop when I heard the tapping sound of shoes behind me. Turning around, I said, "Joe?" There was no pause this time. It was almost immediate. "Yeah?" It was too close. As if he was directly in my face, but in order to do that, he would have had to lean way forward and set it near my ears, which apparently he did. This sudden feedback made me jump, because normally I have to strain my ears to be able to hear him. I jumped, slipped on the soapy water, and fell over as I crashed onto the floor. I was slightly dazed for a second, but luckily I hadn't hit my head. I heard from above me, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." "Ow," was my response from the floor. I felt a hand touch mine as Joe moved to help me up, but I moved my other hand to grasp his, and I bumped his shoulder with my hand. His skin was cold, like incredibly cold, and oily as if he was sweating a lot. The weirdest part was, his shoulder wasn't covered by cloth. It was bare. Now this could mean many things. He could simply be wearing unexpected clothing, like a tank top or the like. It's not like gas station employees are known for our fashion sense, but he quickly backed away from me as I touched him, like he was afraid of me bumping into the rest of his body. He moved so fast that I lost my grip on his hand, and I had to steady myself on the nearby shelves. It hurt slightly. "Ow," I muttered again. Additionally, I had that chill again, that feeling of something is not right. Now my usual and understandable response to this feeling is to leave the area and never return. The only problem was, this was my work, my employment. It had taken me a while to get this job, and I wasn't going to give it up because of a weird feeling and a coworker who behaved oddly. "Thanks for that," I said, trying to both thank Joe for helping me up and reprimanded him for letting go so rapidly. All I heard was the sounds of his shoes vanishing. The next 2 days passed by, I could tell you of other weird things, like the time I heard running water in the break room for an entire hour, and when I asked Joe about it, all he said was, "It's my clothes. I'm washing them." Or the time I passed him as I entered the bathroom and he said, "Try not to be a stranger," as I walked past his pattering steps. I could even tell you of the 3 separate occasions I would be in the store at a quiet moment, and I would hear breathing behind me. I would always ask, "Joe?" The response was always, "Yeah?" In the end, the thing that got me to quit, the moment that made me post this rambling story, was a simple thing. He started to touch me, and when I explain, you'll understand that something supernatural was happening. It was towards the end of my shift last night. I was simply trying to figure out where the broom was in the closet off of the store, when I heard a patter behind me. Not the clunk of shoes, it was again the sound of a pair of feet on linoleum. I turned around as I felt something tap my clothed shoulder. Joe said my name, much louder than he normally did. It almost sounded like normal speaking volume. "Marcus?" My response was simple, "Yeah?" His next words sent that same chill up my spine that had started to become a more common presence in my life. "Don't move," he said quietly, as I felt his hand move onto my shoulder. It was that same cold, slimy thing, though it felt wrong somehow, almost like it was dead flesh. Or maybe that was just me panicking at the situation. His other hand moved onto my other shoulder and began to caress it. His voice was that same, loud as before. Finally, he spoke at a normal volume. "I like you. You can't see the problems." I was too terrified to be offended, though in hindsight, I am offended. What? I get liked because I'm blind? I didn't know he was ableist. "What problems?" I responded. "Shh. It's nothing." I felt his hands grip my shoulders again, tighter, and I felt something press against my stomach. Thinking now, it could have been his foot or leg. Perhaps he contorted himself into an odd position so he could touch my stomach, while keeping 2 hands on my shoulders. But I don't believe that. I swear he had a 3rd hand, touching my stomach with long fingers. This was the final straw. I heard him start to say something, but I was already lifting my white cane. For those of you who don't know, white canes are not sturdy, not even a little bit. They are less good than a solid tree branch in my opinion as a weapon. Mine was slightly better, made of a thin metal and a foldable design. Many solid white canes are not foldable, and are made of fiberglass, which, while light and easy to carry, makes for a terrible weapon. My cane, however, managed to hit his face. I had aimed for where the sound of his voice was coming from, and I had hit him. He let out a grunt, and I could feel his hands loosen slightly. I don't know why, but I simply took this moment to shove forward with my body, pushing outward against him. I don't know how strong he is, but I managed to shove him off of me, and I moved for the door. I did not, in fact, move towards the door quickly. I was disoriented, I could feel my cane was broken, and I needed to find the exit. I heard him quietly behind me as I moved away. "Aw, that's okay." He then made a shushing noise. "It will all be okay. I'll talk to you later." His voice sounded almost infantilizing, fetishistic. I don't know how to put it other than that it creeped me out. Eventually I found the door and just started running parallel to the side of the road, using the sound of traffic to guide me. Next to the gas station was a large cornfield, so I simply followed along the edge of it until I was too tired to run. Then, using my cell phone and the software known as Screen Reader and TalkBack, I called a Lyft and made it home. I emailed my notice of quitting to my boss. The reason Harassment? I don't know if Joe was supernatural or not. The third hand could have been anything really. I'm just a scared guy, writing this post in my room. It's a rambling, badly edited mess that I'm not even going to proofread. I doubt you all can help me, unless you can somehow identify who or what Joe was. In short, I'm just telling you of my problem. It may have been supernatural, and you guys are apparently experts on that stuff. If you know what Joe was, or have seen him, let me know. I'm not going to reveal where the gas station is, simply because it is within walking distance of my home, and I don't want to accidentally dox myself. Sometimes I just want to scrape the skin off my body, a constant irritation to my existence. I want to peel it away from my bones and be rid of it. I know that sounds macabre. I don't mean literally, but often I have scraped myself so rigorously that I have left scars just to get relief. I have an undiagnosed itching disease. At least, I think this is a disease. It has to be. There's nothing I can find on the web, sometimes when I lie in bed, about to descend into unconscious bliss, ready to forego the responsibilities of the awakened world. An itching spell overcomes my entire body. It's much worse than the common description of bugs crawling all over your body. It feels like a moving, unreachable itch under the skin. I scratch one area, only to be cognizant of yet another area that needs scratching. My fingernails are tools without effect, too dull to get the job done. I keep a screwdriver and a pair of scissors on the nightstand beside my bed. Sometimes the finite point of the screwdriver is adequate. Other times the broad surface of a scissor blade is needed. I scrape and dig, plowing sharpened edges across my skin with little or no relief. And yes, I've tried medications of every sort. My dermatologist is bewildered and thinks my condition is more akin to a mental disability rather than a physical ailment. She suggested a psychiatrist might be able to help me stop itching. I do not concur. If the spell drags long into the night and I haven't slept, I will fill the tub with lavender bubble bath and scalding hot water, get in, and hopefully fall asleep. In addition, but not on every occasion, I'll pour myself a little Kentucky bourbon and sip it until I'm numb to the boiling of my skin. I try not to make a habit of it, but it's nice to have a spare bottle just in case. There was a particularly bad night when nothing seemed to work. I had gone through my normal steps of trying to ease my affliction, scratching and bathing and sipping with no relief. Every inch of my skin itched. When I scratched my legs, I felt an itch in my back. Scratching in one locality made it universally worse. I decided another bath may do the trick, and maybe instead of sipping, I'll get straight away drunk and get some sleep. If I can't fall asleep, then I'll pass out. I know I was in the tub for a long time, for my hands and feet were wrinkled, and usually by that time I had fallen asleep. I was in a state of consciousness between slumber and wakefulness when I noticed a little flashing light under the skin in my forearm. A red point of light blinking fast and then slowing down, a continuous pattern alternating between the two. I immediately felt nauseous, my head spinning, stomach churning, and my ears ringing. I vomited in the tub, not once, but numerous times until the contents of my stomach were empty, and then I was dry heaving. This lasted for about an hour. My throat was raw and sore. My stomach muscles were tight, balled up in tension, and then it stopped. My entire body relaxed, and a warm sensation enveloped my body. The light in my forearm was flashing green, slowly fading away, until it was gone. Needless to say, there was no sleep that night. I tried to call out of work, but my manager told me that I had already used all my time, and that another absence would amount to a critical written. I slugged through the day, checking my arm every now and then to make sure there was no blinking light. Over time, my fears subsided, and I reasoned that I was probably drunk. There were the classic symptoms of being way too drunk, except for the blinking light lodged in my skin. Maybe it was a rare hallucination, something I never realized I was prone to, but these things often develop late in life. And then one day, it happened again. I was at work running the forklift, and as I turned the steering wheel, I saw the blinking red light. I jumped off the forklift and ran to the bathroom. I started vomiting before I got to the toilet. Green beans and regurgitated meatloaf spilled out onto the floor. I slung open the stall door and crouched down over the toilet. "Oh, crap," someone said as he walked across my lunch. "Man, are you okay?" I was unable to give a coherent answer. The only sound I could make was an involuntary gag. The door opened and the mysterious stranger was gone. Whoever it was must have been seriously concerned with what he witnessed. Dave, my manager, came to check on me. "John, are you alright? You've been off the dock for an hour now." I managed to communicate something intelligible as to my assertion that I was in fact not alright. An hour? His sense of time was well removed from reality. This must be food poisoning or something. What did you eat? I guess I'll take you to the hospital. You think you can stop throwing up before you get in my car? The blinking red light slowed and turned green. I think I can manage. Dave drove me to the emergency room and dropped me off at the door. "When they're done with you, call the center and Todd will come pick you up. You're good with the absence as well. I won't count it against you for leaving early." I turned and lumbered towards the automatic doors. As the door slid open, I noticed a tall, slender humanoid, dressed in a black robe, standing next to the nurse behind the desk. It was hunched over to fit under the ceiling. It had an elongated skull that split in two at the back of the head and curled in under its cheek lines, a broad face with 4 eyes and a wide gaping mouth. Its skin was gray, mottled with bright red scars. As it moved its arms, they extended well beyond its body and over the top of the desk. The creature reached around the nurse and motioned for me to come forward. I ran away from the building into the entrance of the parking lot. I called the center and got an irritated Todd on the phone. "Already? Dave hasn't even gotten back yet." "Yeah, I'll come get you." "Todd, I'll meet you at the store. I'm going to get something to drink. Something to calm my stomach," I explained, not wanting to be anywhere near the hospital. "They didn't give you anything there?" "I didn't go in. I'm fine. Waste of time." "Well, does that mean you can finish your shift?" I told him politely that just because I didn't go inside didn't mean I was ready to go back to work. I was still sick. "Whatever. You know we had time to clean that stuff up," he answered. "You cleaned up the vomit?" "No, but I had to pull someone away from the dock. Now we're behind." I just apologized and asked again if he could come pick me up. It took him 2 hours to get there. When I got home, I was determined to cut the dang thing out of my skin. I had a good sharp box cutter and a bottle of liquor to quell my inhibitions. I knew exactly where it was located, the light flashing incessantly in my mind. The very thought of it made my stomach queasy. I took several shots and waited for the effects. I wanted to be numb, not sloppy. I didn't need to be a precise surgeon, but I sure as heck didn't want to haphazardly cut in the wrong place. Quick, precise, and without much intrusion. It didn't seem deep, so I decided to make 3 incisions, fold the skin back, and pluck it out. I took another shot. The anticipation of pain was affecting my buzz. I grew impatient with the cowardice, took a large swig from the bottle, placed my arm over the sink, and made 3 quick cuts. The pain was sharp and excruciating. Blood seeped through the wound, thick and fast, large drops pounding against the porcelain. My flap idea wasn't as well thought out as I had imagined. The skin didn't easily fold back, and there was too much blood for me to assess the situation. My will was faltering. I didn't have the fortitude to make another cut. I ran some warm water and put my arm underneath. I had all but made up my mind that I was done, but then as I washed off the blood, I could see that the light was still blinking red. My stomach churned, my eyes shook, spots shooting across my field of vision. I started dry heaving, my body jerking violently, throwing blood everywhere. The sink and floor were a mess. I slipped and fell to the floor, knife still in hand. My mind was overwhelmed with sensations and none of them good. Instinct took over and I shoved the knife point down through the skin and right into the light. It stuck. The pain in my stomach subsided, but the feeling of the knife in my arm became more acute. The light faded and shut off. I moved the knife vertically, making sure that the light I had snagged didn't fall off. Ironically, this meant cutting through the flap of skin that had finally separated. I pulled quickly, cutting and tearing the skin from my wound. Stuck to the end of the knife was a 2-inch clear vial with thick copper ends. I thoroughly cleaned myself and the bathroom, and then bandaged up my wound as best I could, with the hopes of finding something at the pharmacy better than a wash rag and duct tape to bind my wound. This would have to wait until morning. It was late into the night and I was exhausted. I took the bottle of whiskey with me to bed. Sometime during the night I felt pressure in my chest. I woke up, but unable to move. Standing above me was the creature, his large hand and slender tree limb fingers pinning me to the bed, each of its 4 eyes blinking erratically, not in unison, all looking in different directions. The creature was angry. With its other hand it pointed down at my forearm, shaking its head in disapproval. He then placed his frigid index finger on my eye, and I fell asleep. The next morning when I awoke, the pain in my arm was unbearable. My makeshift dressing had failed and blood was all over the sheets. I hurried to the bathroom to grab some painkillers and a clean towel. My stomach started to hurt, and the room began to spin. I panicked, snatched the tape off, and uncovered the wound. Nothing but a nasty skin carving with congealed blood. The feeling wasn't like it was before. Maybe it was just the stomach flu. The vision in my left eye was a little blurry, and again I thought it was nothing as before. But this blurriness persisted. It was a strange sensation, more like a flashing. I turned to look in the mirror, and to my horror, I saw a blinking red light just behind the pupil of my left eye. I don't allow myself to buy a doormat for my home anymore. I lived in an apartment complex about 5 years ago, right in the heart of New York City. I was living alone at the time. My family was in Rhode Island. And with me being new to the area, I didn't have many friends to speak of. I moved into Shallow Reed with my backpack and 2 large suitcases. Boxes from home were on the way, but it couldn't be anything too big to not fit in the mail, and had to be light enough for me to not go dirt poor in fees. My family helped, but they've already done enough. I was fresh out of college and looking to be an editor. This lifestyle didn't come with the highest hope. Just an immature energy that will push your loved ones away from you, but will fulfill your personal aspirations. My apartment was small, but fulfilled with more than enough. The rooms were clean, and the utilities worked. I was stressed, but happy, excited even. The area was, well, pretty rough. I had to grow a pretty thick skin to not take it personally if someone was calling me something or trying to hassle me. Crossing the street was once stressful, but it's nothing new. The bus station was only down the street, and it took me everywhere I needed to go. I didn't take my car with me, so walking and public transport was my way to go. It was about 2 years into my job at a publishing house that I had to leave. I had recently gotten a few shelves, a few wall decorations, and a welcome mat for the entrance to my apartment. It was a tufted mat with a rainbow, and under it was a white lettering of welcome. Something sweet, subtle, queer pride, you know, a homey feel. The day of the incident went about as expected. I woke up for work, did what I had to do, and came home. I didn't go out to a club or a bar that night. I liked the nightlife of the city. I had a few people over and every now and again, but no one really stuck around. I had a relatively defensive disposition with where I lived. There were a few times that I had to fend off solicitors. I always kept my door locked and bolted. I didn't take any risks, especially when I lived on the first floor. I was pretty mad that night, to be honest. The unit above me was blasting music, and the couple in the room next to me was enjoying their relationship just a bit too loudly. It was a little after 8 p.m. and I was watching something on my TV. I didn't really watch a lot of TV shows. I read what I needed from my phone and heard office gossip at work. I did watch the nightly news though. Got into that habit from my parents. I had to be in the know about literary news, not so much local news. Suddenly, I heard the faintest sound of a knock. I perked up from my seat on my couch but didn't mute the show I was watching. It could have been anything. There was a knock again, this time sounding more firm, more confident. Immediately I stood, some panic starting to rush through me. Who would be knocking on my door at this hour? The police? Maybe a neighbor. I walked over to my door quietly, sneaking up to look through the peephole. The person was looking down at the floor and had a red jacket on with a hood obscuring their face. They looked small though, like a child. They nervously shuffled as they waited for me to respond. I cleared my throat and put on my man voice, trying to sound somewhat intimidating. They were knocking at my door after all. Hello? Who's there? The person turned to look at the door. I could see the tears running down the young girl's face. I barely even gave it a second thought as I opened the door. With her being what, no more than 9, I was concerned for her rather than myself. Hi, little one. Are you looking for someone? Is someone out with you? I can't find my mom. She sniffled and wiped her eyes. She was wearing a simple red raincoat that was soaked from the rain outside. I peeked down each end of the hall and saw no one else there. I knelt to be closer to her height. I'm not a big guy, but I towered over her. When did you last see her? She was here, but then she was gone. She continued to talk, but her words came out as a blubbering mess. It's alright. Listen, we'll find her. Do you know a phone number we can call? She nodded and wiped her face once more. Come inside and we'll get you dried off. I gently offered my hand, which she took after a moment. There was no such thing as a front office to shallow read, and at this time of day, I doubted any of the landlords were here. She wiped her shoes on my doormat, and when she looked up, her eyes were wide, scanning around the apartment. Not that I felt embarrassed at the time, but my house wasn't really geared toward young children. I had a nice little cart of different alcohols, and various collections strewn about that I used for decoration. I led her to the living room where the TV was. She took off her raincoat after I asked if I could leave it on the doorknob outside the apartment. Anyone who knew her would recognize it. and I doubted anyone in my building would steal a children's raincoat. I quickly rushed to my bathroom to grab her a towel. She was standing in the center of the living room staring at the TV. I offered her the towel and grabbed my phone. "Here you are. I'm Derek. Can I get your name?" "I'm Cho. I'm calling Mom," she said in her small voice. I offered her my phone, which she quickly snatched up, dialing the numbers. She turned her back to me as the dial tone rang. I stepped away to the kitchen to give her a moment. A small marble island separated the two rooms, which allowed me to peek over at her while I got her a cup of water. After a few moments, she spoke in a different language, which I only knew enough about to know it was some Asian language. She turned to me as I handed her the water. "What is this place?" she asked. "Shallow Reed Apartments. I'm Unit 5, first floor," I clarified. She spoke again to the person on the phone. She was quiet for a moment, looking around the room as if someone could be listening to her. She briefly made eye contact with me and flicked her gaze away. I felt a bit awkward standing there, despite knowing the fact that this little girl could do absolutely nothing to harm me. I was still a bit on edge. It was a few moments later before Cho handed me my phone back. "She'll be here soon," was all she said to me, looking down at the floor. I looked at my phone, thinking if I should report this to the police or not. Yeah, her mother is on the way, but why was she missing in the first place? "How come you knocked on my door and not Unit 1? "Sorry, the first door in the hall." "Your carpet." My carpet? I thought. What did she mean by that? "There's a rainbow. No one else had a rainbow," she said simply, like it was obvious. I realized then she was talking about my doormat. Shallow Reeds wasn't exactly the most queer inclusive, but I didn't worry about someone knocking down my door for having a rainbow on my mat. I hoped to show a bit of friendliness. Didn't expect it would lead a kid to my door. I moved on and asked another question. "How did you and your mom get separated?" I asked her in the most peaceful tone I could. She didn't answer. She just kept staring at the ground. Her eyes darted to my TV when the opening theme for the news started playing. "Can you change this, please?" she asked. I mean, it felt out of the blue that she asked me that, but then again, I don't think the news is the most popular children's show. I found the remote right where I left it on the arm of the couch and put on a kids show starring a blue healer family. Figured that would be better than the nightly news. She didn't really seem open to talking much anyway. Well, the quicker she's out of here, the better, I thought. It was maybe 5 minutes later that a hurried knock sounded through the apartment. I immediately stood up from where I was on the opposite end of the couch from Cho and rushed to the door. I instantly opened it up and found a woman clutching the red raincoat in her hands. Unlike Cho, she had long black hair and a slight hunch on her back. She looked younger than what I expected to be walking with a hunch. She was maybe in her 30s to 40s. Cho cried behind me, "Mama!" I quickly stepped to the side as the woman moved past me and into my home. I kept the door open, expecting them to be on their way shortly. The mother started talking to Cho in the same language I heard over the phone. She cupped her face in her hands and did a thorough look over of her child. "She arrived maybe 10 minutes ago. She hasn't said much." I spoke up, but the woman didn't indicate if she heard me or not. "Would you mind if we use your restroom? She has a cut on her arm that I want to clean," said the mom. "Oh, sure. It's down the hall and to the left. First aid kit is in the closet." I pointed in the direction she had to go. My bedroom was right across from it. She led her daughter to the bathroom, looking a bit too curiously into my bedroom for my liking. They've seen my whole apartment by this point. I didn't remember seeing a scratch on the kid, but I didn't search her to begin with. While they were in the bathroom, I went to change the TV, but couldn't find the remote. I found that a bit odd, seeing as I placed it in the same spot I did earlier. The great thing about today's day and age is that everything is digital. So I pulled up the TV app on my phone and changed it from there. When I changed the channel back to the news, I was met with the video of a roaring house fire that happened earlier in the day. Well, I didn't miss all of the nightly news coverage. I could hear them fiercely whispering in the bathroom, which I didn't find surprising. I'm sure the mom was giving the kid an earful, but I was under the impression that improper adult supervision was the cause and not the child. But I'm not going to intervene. And in our last update of the night, we have a local alert brought to you by the police department. We are on the lookout for a group of individuals wanted for home invasion and homicide. On the screen, they flashed a few images of men that all looked like basic figures. None of them really stood out in any remarkable way. They all wore black masks and all had thin figures. They've been breaking into homes and stealing electronics, jewelry, and anything that could be sold off easily. It was what came next that caused my stomach to churn. In their most recent attack, the homeowners had a camera system installed that captured the entire event all on film. On the TV screen, someone was standing in a bright red raincoat. The recording had audio and subtitles to go along with it. I can't find my mom. I could feel the blood draining from my face. I quickly lowered the TV volume, looking behind me to make sure no one was there. The bathroom light was still on, but the whispering had stopped. I turned back to the screen, and they had fast-forwarded the clip. The same woman in my bathroom was there on my screen. I quickly dialed 911 and turned off the TV. I kept my eyes locked on the bathroom as I rushed to the front door. When I was about to reach for the handle, a heavy knock banged against the door. I froze in place, my finger hovering over the call button. From the bathroom, I heard the lady call. "That should be my brother. He's our ride home. Can you tell him we will be right out?" "Sure thing. Let me just turn off the oven," I responded. Panic coursed through me. I slowly locked the door. I even grabbed some mail to make an impromptu doorstop. As I shoved it underneath the door, the person knocked again. I jumped back and tiptoed to my bedroom. They pounded the door again. I held my breath as I passed the bathroom. Neither the girl nor the woman made a sound. I locked my door behind me and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? "My house is being broken into. It's the people from..." I was interrupted by a sudden slamming. They were breaking down the front door. "They made it into my home," I whispered. I stepped away from my door. "Sir, what is your location?" There were shouts from the men who busted the door down. They were smashing my stuff and God knows what else. I knew my door wouldn't hold long enough for the police to get here. I had to do something now. Without a second thought, I ran to the one window in my room. I heard the woman cry. My doorknob twisted as she did. She was crying for help. She yelled that they would kill her if I didn't help. They would kill her child. I opened the window and pushed the screen out of the frame. The walls shook as someone started to pound my bedroom door. I stepped out of the frame, only to have a hand grab tightly onto my shirt collar. Someone was standing outside waiting. I dropped my phone as I was pushed to the ground. I could hear the 911 operator yelling through the phone as it dropped, breaking against the small rocks that lined my building. There were hands around my throat before I could even react. The person on top of me dropped all his weight onto my hips, straddling me and keeping me pinned. I struggled in his grip. I didn't even have time to panic. All I could do was react. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, the utter disregard for humanity. I can still see the smile stretched across his lips. I could see myself reflected in the black of his eyes. I tried to knock away his arms, tried to scratch at his face. My head was pounding, and my vision getting darker and darker. I couldn't hear him, but I could see him bending closer to my face. Spit hit my cheeks as he laughed just inches from me. I grabbed the ground under me and used the last of my strength to aim for those dark pools. The blood hit my cheek before his laughter turned into screaming. Air rushed into my lungs as the man clutched his eye, or what was left of it. I could only wiggle away from him as he dislodged the small rock from his eye socket. He pulled out more than the rock. I finally picked myself up and left the man behind me. I ran as fast as I possibly could and didn't look back. I ran across the street and started yelling at the top of my lungs for help. There were a few businesses, one of which was a pizza joint that still had its lights on. I ran to their door and yanked it open. I quickly found the lock for the glass door and turned it. The employee immediately started yelling at me, getting ready to defend themselves, I'm sure. I turned to face them and they stopped trying to shoo me away after they saw the dark red handprints around my neck. Everything was a blur of movement from that point on. The pizza place ended up calling the cops, which is where I was able to give them more information. The cop car took a few minutes to arrive, long enough for me to know that if I didn't get out of my window. By the time they arrived, there wasn't anyone left in my apartment. Even with the officers by my side, I was worried about going in. They had a team come in to try and get samples of anything they could think of. They swabbed the man's blood that got on me and took photos of everything. My apartment was an utter disaster. Whatever they couldn't take, they smashed. The police took me down to the station in order for me to write up a formal report. I told them about Cho and the woman who came to my door. Hours later, they gave me an update. They found a man fitting the description I gave them. He was missing his eye and was dumped in a garage bin 20 minutes from where I lived. Even after I spent a week in a hotel and another week at a coworker's place, there was no sign of the people who attacked me. The cops weren't any help either. Without anything to go off of, all they could do was wait. I asked the cops why they came after me, and they responded by asking me if I owned any firearms, which they would have known the answer to already, but I told them I didn't. They told me how the other homes they had been suspected of breaking into all had something in common. The first family they attacked worked closely with a local church. Another home was just an apartment of college students. And the last home, the one that got footage of the woman from the security cameras, was a family who didn't have their citizenship in the States yet. It didn't take much to connect the dots that none of these people would have owned any guns or would have turned away a young child. We were all targeted as an easy mark. The police said they couldn't know how much the group knew about us until they were able to catch the culprits, but they knew enough about me. I've since moved and taken some self-defense courses, and even bought myself a handgun that I touch once a year to bring to the range. I jump every time I hear a knock at the door, but I'll be ready for when they come to visit me again. At least, that's how I felt before I came home today. And on my doorknob, there was a red raincoat. I have this hobby of watching kids shows, even though I'm nearly in my 20s. I don't know why. Might be my autism or something, but I just like it, and that's all there is to it. When I get home after a boring day at school, I'd go to my room and watch anything available on my TV. Basically whatever is on Netflix, Stan, YouTube, and Prime. It just makes me feel nostalgic again. Everything was good until he appeared. I don't know who he is or what he wants, but even if he doesn't mean any harm, I don't know if he can be trusted. It happened 1 week ago. I was watching an episode of Arthur, can't remember which one, with a hot plate of garlic bread and a cup of Pepsi. Midway through the episode, I noticed something in the background. It looked like some kind of character, but all I saw was a black stick figure, standing behind a tree and observing the characters. I couldn't see him very well because of the show's quality, but I ended up shrugging it off. Must have been a small animation error. But last Thursday changed my mind a bit. I was in my bedroom once again. I was taking a break from the god-awful homework assignments, and to kill the boredom, I decided to watch ItsDragonaire. Watching cartoons always puts me at ease. It helps relieve stress from everyday life. Then I saw him again, peeking behind a corner. But I could see this character clearly this time. He looked like he was wearing pitch black clothing. His white skin was so bright that it almost looked like it was glowing, and his baggy eyes were a pale pink. No bloodshot eyes. I only got a good look of this character because as soon as he appeared, I paused the show and examined him like a captured wild animal. As I looked at this thing, I could already feel something was very wrong about him. It wasn't that he didn't match the show's art style, or his design felt Tim Burton-esque. There was another feeling. Dread. I snapped out of our staring contest as my mom called me to take out the trash. I shook my head and looked back at the ajar door, calling back that I was coming. Then I looked back at my TV, and as you would expect, gone. "It's nothing. I'm just tired," I said to myself quietly, getting up as I left the room. I wish that was the answer. I really do wish that this character was a result of my mind being mean to me. On Saturday, my uncle came over for a barbecue dinner my mom and dad hosted. My uncle really loved crime drama shows, especially Breaking Bad. Tonight, I saw him watching Better Call Saul, and honestly, Saul Goodman was my favorite character. I never really liked drama shows, but I give both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul exceptions. I was in the living room watching an episode and I was getting sleepy, so I prepared to get off the sofa when I noticed someone. He was just sitting in a chair, like he was waiting. As we made eye contact, something then hit me. He was never observing any of the characters. He was observing me the whole time. "Hey mate, you okay?" my uncle said, noticing me freeze and staring at the TV so intently. I shook my head and excused myself, fast walking to my bedroom. The sightings kept getting more frequent. I saw him in shows like Teen Titans, Futurama, DuckTales, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Seinfeld. Yes, even that, I'm not joking. And so many more. He was always hiding in the backgrounds, and just as I thought I was going insane, it all suddenly stopped one morning. I was watching My Little Pony. I know, deal with it. And I expected to see him again, but he never showed up. I checked other shows, but he was never there. I was relieved, but when I went to the kitchen to make myself breakfast, my dad comes in and asks me if I left the living room TV on last night. "No, I didn't. Why you ask?" I reply with a funny little smirk. "Well, someone did, and all that was on the television was just plain old static." My dad replied. "Weird," I said, still jokingly, but at the same time, I felt a little unnerved. This brings me up to last Wednesday night. Me and my parents were having dinner at a pub, and we unexpectedly meet one of my dad's many friends, and he wanted to do a selfie with us, so we did just that, although I was hesitant. When we got home, I got a notification from Facebook that my dad's friend had just posted our selfie, so I went to check it out. My dad, mom, and the friend are making dumb, silly faces, while I was closed-mouthed smiling. This photo looks perfectly Wait, who is that? I looked closely at the background and I nearly let my phone slip from my trembling grasp. He was behind us, outside the pub, peering through the glass, staring into the camera and at me. Any of my family members or friends haven't noticed him, like I'm the only one who can see him. My TV in my bedroom hasn't been used in a while. I don't want to get rid of it. My dad did give it to me after all. Just 2 days after the night at the pub, I was home alone with my dog Max. He's a Kelpie, and I still couldn't get the image of the character out of my head, so I basically locked me and my dog in my room, fearing that he might be in the house. Not even a minute later, he begins to whine and growl at the door, but no one tries to open it. No jiggling the doorknob, no knocks, nothing. This went on for 2 minutes before whoever was outside my bedroom walks away. I could hear faint footsteps going downstairs. I've also locked the window and closed the blinds, just in case. Whoever or whatever he is, I hope he leaves me alone soon. Being pretty is a privilege, but being attractive is a gift. As a former ugly hag, now 37, I knew this well. I had thick eyebrows and thin lips, awkward eyes, and a long nose. My boss always liked standing next to me. It highlighted just how ugly I was, and how good looking she was. She went out to clubs every night. I stayed home. She slept with her extremely kind golf star husband, and I cleaned up after my mean, drunken one. She had children, and I was infertile. In short, her life was full of excitement and joy, and mine was just as good as my looks. Not at all. "Hi, Gordy. You don't mind if I squeeze in beside you, do you?" She would ask every time we had a company picture to take every year for the past 11. Go ahead. She will anyway. She just pretended to care what I thought so everyone could believe she was still an upstanding woman. She also upstaged everyone during the Christmas parties. She brought in the very best desserts and main courses so people would praise her for weeks after. She made sure she snooped around to hear exactly what someone had been wondering about, and if she was their secret Santa, she'd bring it and surprise them. But not me. I remember she blatantly assigned herself to me to flaunt her wealth and bought me a designer dress I could never even wear. 2 sizes too small. Her husband slipped me some money to get it specifically tailored, though. I always thought he was too good for her. Honest mistake. Babel was just excited to get you something, he told me with a wink. He chooses to believe in her. I can't quite blame him when he gets a completely different woman at home. It was after one of these events, I don't remember which, when I was leaving to walk myself back to my old apartment and I saw it. A booth stood not too far off with a sign that read, "Look into the mirror and receive your rating." A mirror stood nearby and practically towered over me. Some odd-looking metallic lights surrounded the frame, or maybe they were the frame. At the time I was confused, but thinking about that mirror, mirrors in general, I feel incredibly sweaty and nervous. I start losing face. PTSD, perhaps. My boss stood beside me that night, reading the sign, and once she understood its function, she immediately became enamored with the mirror, lazily trailing a finger up the framing of it. "Hey, Gordy, would you be a doll and test this thing for me? I don't quite know what I'm doing." She laughed, and finally, she cut the act. "No, really. I just want to see how low you score on the leaderboard. You're just the best confidence booster." She laughed again. I hate how genuinely nice it was. Too bad I was too busy gagging at the amount of hairspray she began to spray to mention it. I stepped forward and just stared into the mirror. An ugly old woman, short and rotund. I hated my face. I hated my grainy hair, an awkward frown, my double chin and my glasses that always seemed too small for my face. My husband could do better. He always told me so anyway. After more torturous staring, the mirror seemed to glow around the edges, spitting out a small roll of paper. But before I could grab it, my boss snatched it, unraveling it between her fake nails. A 5? This thing must be broken. She cackled and tossed my rating to the concrete. I scrambled to pick it back up. Seriously? Who would rate you above even a gracious 2? I scoffed. I don't know where I got my confidence from, but I was feeling bold that night. Afraid I scored higher than you? I spoke too soon because she shoved me out of the way and stepped into the mirror's view. Watch your mouth, she spat. The mirror caught my eye, and I just ignored her complaining. Its glow getting brighter and brighter. Even if it's broken, I'll always be better than you. In a world where dog eats dog, you will always be on the very bottom, neglected and starving, just like you're. The longer she went on, the brighter it got, before suddenly she yelped. It's hot, it's hot. Oh my god, it's hot. Gordy, help me. I could only watch wide-eyed as everything but her face burned alive, her skin shriveling like a rotten fruit. Iron and the smell of plastic filled the air as her clothes and accessories melted away into a puddle, as if she had never been real to begin with. Her flesh and bone now a molten ooze, face left behind. I picked up the gooey aloe vera-like skin that had been her award-winning smile and trembled as the mirror slowly went dormant, and spat out her rating. 1,000. Smoking hot. I think about that day often. Maybe because that was the day I found true beauty. Now I go out to clubs. I climb the ranks. I organize the company pictures, eat at fancy restaurants, stare at my reflection in my new champagne glasses, cook my new family dinner. I only have one problem. No matter how much I avoid it, there's always a brand new mirror waiting for me when I'll least expect it. This time, though, she stares outside of it, waiting for me to get just close enough so that she can take her life back. Or maybe it's the face she wants.